Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar where I'm joined by the wonderful Angela and we're going to be covering off the Unlocking the Power of Social Learning. So I'm Georgina, a Business Development Manager at Thrive, and I'm joined by the wonderful Angela. If you would like to just introduce yourself, please, Angela.
Hey guys, hi. My name's Angela. I am the L&D director, so all things learning and development at a business called Yopa. And we've had Thrive in Yopa for about 9 months, and it really has been a game changer in terms of all things social learning. So I'm really excited to talk you through some of that today.
Thank you. That's great to hear. So for today's session, as Angela mentioned, she's going to be sharing her insights and experiences of running a social learning strategy at Yopa, which they've been doing alongside the use of the Thrive LXP, which has really helped them to actually deliver on that strategy. So we've got lots of exciting things to cover off today. As Cass had mentioned, so for anyone who's just joined, if you've got any questions, please do just drop them in throughout the session and we'll be picking those up at the end. And yes, I think without further ado, we'll get into it. So Angela, I think it'd be helpful if you could just start off by covering actually a bit of background about Yopa and who they are in case there's anyone that's with us today that's not familiar.
Excellent, lovely. Thanks, Georgina. So Yopa are a UK-based, really high-growth, tech-led estate agency. We've been around for about 4 years, and I think 4 to 5 years, and I think we're probably navigating our way out of the startup ways of working into a much more scaled, professionalized business. What our business do is we offer the exact same, if not better, service than what a traditional high street agent could provide. And we do all of that for, a fixed fee, a fair fixed fee. Our growth has been crazy in the last couple of years. I think when I joined the business 4 years ago, we were the 47th largest estate agent in the UK. I mean, 47th. We're now the 5th. So,
Wow.
Yeah, huge growth, a business that is always evolving, always adapting, always changing, but a business that has quite a complex structure in terms of how we navigate with our different people groups across the business.
Amazing, thank you. And then I think it would also be helpful if we could just kind of set the scene and give a bit of a background into where Yopa were with your learning strategy before Thrive and before implementing this social way of doing things. Because I know when we were speaking, it was a bit more of a traditional method. You were using a bit of a very traditional platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could just sort of set that scene as to why you moved to social and Thrive.
Yeah, perfect, Georgina. Thank you. So there's a couple of reasons. I think there is two things that work in tandem here, which is the business growth and the evolvement of the learning strategy to keep up and serve the relevant growth within the business. So as I say, I started in Yopa like 4 years ago, brand new business. It was a startup. It was all a bit messy in certain areas. There wasn't a learning strategy, and there certainly wasn't a online platform. So I was the first hire to go in from an L&D perspective and build all of that out. As you can imagine, at such an early stage of growth, every penny counts in terms of where the business invests their money. And we went down the route of adopting a free platform that had a lovely costume applied to it. So on the outside, it looked quite good. But when you lifted, so if it was a car on the outside, we made it look like a Ferrari. But when we lifted the bonnet, it was, broken. And that platform was Moodle, so we went for a platform that was cost effective and could serve a purpose. And if I'm being really honest, the core purpose was to make sure that we could be compliant, because there are lots of regulations in the property industry. So it was a case of get something in that serves a purpose and not much else.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good to know. So I know we're going to delve into the detail a bit more as to what that new strategy looks like with Thrive. So that will be the basis of today's session. But before we get into that detail, we did just want to ask everyone on this session a quick question and run a quick poll. So hopefully you can all see this on your screen with some answers to choose from. So what are the most important things that your learning platform can offer you? So just going to give a few seconds for everyone to vote. You can select more than one option as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to hear from you guys what's been the most important thing.
There you go, we're getting some poll answers in. At the moment, we can see blended learning is really important, analytics, social learning in UGC is up there with compliance as well. Compliance is getting a few votes. We'll just let a few more people vote. People are still going. Okay, so it looks like the top answer is the ability to enable blended learning with 77%. I will end that poll now and show everyone the results. So if I click share results, you should all be able to see it.
Yeah, thanks, Cass. Oh, wow, yeah. So the blended learning is definitely up there, as is compliance and social learning and analytics. So that's really, really interesting. I think that fits actually really nicely with what we're going to talk about today, because I know they are some really key themes of what was important to you, Angela, when you were selecting a platform and implementing the strategy. So that's interesting. Do you have anything you want to share on that, Angela, seeing those results?
The really, really interesting thing is if we had have rewound this 12 months ago and I was a participant, I would have voted blended learning was my most important piece. So yeah, hopefully I can share some insight on that today. And then, yes, as I look at the analytics, was another big requirement for me. Again, based on some of the complex hierarchies that we have across our business model. So yeah, love that. We can definitely build on some of those. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Fits really nicely. So that's great. Without further ado then, I will pass over to you, Angela, to begin covering off some of the content.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, first and foremost, in terms of what we'll break it down into today, guys, is we will look at social learning, we will look at using campaigns for learning, and then we will also dive into some of the nitty-gritty on operational learning. So hopefully it ticks some of those boxes for you. When I think about the strategy as to, why have we gone down the route that we have, again, a little bit of a history lesson in the fact that, 2020, that year, we knew we were not happy with what our current online offering looked like. We were then hit with the pandemic like everyone else was, and we felt that we definitely had a gap in terms of being able to connect our teams when they were so dispersed. And also, it wasn't just about learning, it was how do we build that community within our teams while they were dispersed among on the pandemic. So when I looked at what was the online platform I needed, what we've got on the slide here, they were crucially important for the Yopa strategy. So if I dive into a couple in more detail, Georgina, so if we think about building a community, building a community at Yopa and the whole collaboration with colleagues, both of those are, key focus areas for us. The reason being is our business model is made up of two very large contact center and operational sites. And then we have around 150 self-employed business owners dispersed all across the country. So we tried a few different things in terms of how to build a community and how to collaborate. and that was really about getting our users engaged, getting our remote teams engaged, encouraging them to put up their own content, the unlocking the knowledge. So encouraging those people who were all dispersed to be able to effectively share their knowledge and their skills. And what I mean by that is we had a great example of a lady called Diane who was up in the Northeast. She had a new person starting her team. She had never met them. And she was able to use the platform to literally deploy in the moment training content. And we've never had that before. So that was really quite cool.
Amazing. So is it worth just jumping into some of those examples now?
Yeah, perfect.
And we can talk a bit more detail of those. So hopefully you can still all see my screen of the Thrive and Yopa platform. Can you see that, Angela?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so this is that Comic Relief World Happiness Day question, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and this was to definitely play into. So if I think about the points on the slide, this was definitely to play into, building a community, encouraging our people to just connect and chat with each other about the stuff that's not work, about the things that actually make them smile at times. So we really, really focused on International Happiness Day combined with Comic Relief, just asking people simple things like what makes them smile, what makes them happy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really like the comments on this one because, like you say, it's all kind of more personal stuff. It's taking it away from a work focus and actually just letting people connect and communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, it was lovely.
And then we have the mantra for the day. So I love this one.
Yeah, and again, this was from a lady who had never been a remote worker in her life, and many of her team hadn't. And she really took it on board to think about, how was she feeling on the inside? How might other people be feeling? And she on her own initiative, she found it really helpful to share quotes with her team. And again, just another example of being able to connect whilst in that remote environment.
Yeah, love that. And then the top tip question.
I have to say, this is a favorite of mine. We actually, we deploy top tip quite regularly with maybe a bit of a different wording so that we can continue to do it. But I think this was Learning at Work week actually, and as a business we were deploying lots of content around learning at work, but actually some of the really, really helpful content, the relatable content, comes from the users on the platform. So just getting them to engage and share best practice, again, really, really helpful.
Yeah, and you can just see there's so many people commenting on this and providing their top tips, which, like you say, it's just a perfect example of that user-generated content, and actually hearing it from your colleagues is really, really valuable, I think.
Yeah, and it really builds those for anybody else who's in an organization where you have a in-house team and you have a field team. Doing things like this really builds those bridges to make sure that everybody can be the best that they can be and eliminate any frustrations.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so we'll just jump back to the slides and move on to the campaign learning element. So it'd be great to hear how you guys have actually been using campaigns to, I guess, drive that engagement even further.
Yeah. One of the key priorities in our Thrive Learning or our online learning strategy is that we didn't want to go down the method of push. You have to push people to the platform. I've been there, I've done that, and I've wore too many of those t-shirts, and it is painful. So really, campaign learning was a way for Yopa to activate a way of working that pulled people into the platform, because actually, there was some really interesting stuff, and they wanted to know more. And so it was an easy segue to pull people in. And then to build further on campaign learning, one of the things that we focused on is actually then tying some of our company engagement activities to the campaign that we're promoting in that specific month. So we could dive into a couple of the examples, Georgina, and I can talk through.
Absolutely. So I suppose just for a bit of background, for anyone that is joining today that's not familiar with the Thrive LXP, one of the big features of our platform is the campaigns that we run, which you can just see. So this is the Yopa homepage of their platform. So this banner across the top is where you have your campaigns, which can be running, you can run multiple ones at different times. And yeah, some really, really exciting topics that Yopa have covered, which I think, just looking at this Wimbledon one, we've got some great user shared content in here, which, so people, it's not only endorsed content coming from the organization, so like Angela's team, but also actually from your end users as well. Do you want to just talk us through a little bit more of the Wimbledon one, or should we move on to, I know we've got a couple of examples here as well.
Yeah. Well, we've looked at Wimbledon. Let's move on to maybe the top learner campaign, the competition. This is one that I get that I get really, really excited about. So we use the gamification aspect in Thrive, so that the points, our business is mad for the points. They all want to, increase their points. So with that competitive vibe, it was a no-brainer to use the gamification to support campaign competitions. So in this case, this was part of our launch, our small change, big gains launch. We tied in any of the top learners that week based on points could win a lovely prize. And bearing in mind, this was, bearing in mind it was in lockdown, people were stuck at home. So to get a gorgeous Fortnum and Mason afternoon tea hamper delivered to your door, that really went down well. And it really pulled our users into engaging with the new content that we deployed for launch, and of course driving their points.
Yeah, love that. And then you had your mindfulness campaign.
Yeah, we did. So March was all about mental health awareness, mindfulness, being present, self-care, all of those topics that I think historically they haven't always been front and center in the workplace. I think it's wonderful in today's world that we now put more focus on these areas. But again, with March Mindfulness, that was our campaign for the month. There were loads of content that we deployed on it. But again, the piece that brought it to life was we also then engaged some instructors to come and deliver mindfulness sessions, meditation sessions.
Love that.
And so that gave our people the option to jump on, join in, and actually just take that moment for themselves. And of course, the ones that couldn't, we recorded them and we held the recordings on the campaign feed as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, I guess the mindfulness campaign and topic has just been so important over the last year.
Absolutely.
But, really, really nice to not focus, again, like we say, on just kind of the traditional learning side of things, but actually more well-rounded and what's important to employees at the minute. We also had this, which just shows, I think, our search facility, as well as the fact that you had all that content covering that topic. And
you're right, Georgina, to be able just to type in mindfulness, and it's like, wow, look at everything we have. And I think, in fairness and for authenticity, in today's webinar, the great news is that as a business, Yopa, we're pretty lean on our head count, but actually we still have all of this content because we can tap into so many of the resources that the Thrive team provide for us. So what it means is that we've got a pot of content that we can rely on and then build on, rather than having to create everything from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is great. Like with a campaign, although it might be running for that short period of time, all of that content will still sit in the platform. And like you say, it's really useful and easy to kind of reuse that, reissue it if you need to, and for other people to just find it really quickly, really easily if they want to.
Yeah, perfect.
I think it is just worth, just because we're on this search page, just showing that you can also really quickly filter your search results, so you can just find that content that you need. And like we've got different content types and stuff, so I guess like when you were running your yoga sessions and stuff, you'd be able to filter on events and find what that session, where that session is. So yeah, that's really good. Okay, I think that was everything on the campaign section. So we'll go back and we'll have a look now at this area here.
Yeah, so that's our, what shall I call them? There are Thrive newsletters, let's say. So one of the things that we are, and we are on a learning curve, I think that's fair to say. We're learning every day in terms of what our users want and what they need, and more importantly, what they don't want. And what we've learned is that as great as notifications are to let people know that things are on the platform and available, because we have quite a lot of content on our platform, it can be quite overwhelming. So as part of our strategy, we really consider when we use notifications, because we do, and then we consider where we don't. And actually, a lot of our campaign learning, we absorb that into our weekly Thrive newsletter to give people a view on what's coming, what's going on, what they can find, and they can access the platform that way.
Yeah, love that. And then we have the operational learning, which I know was, as you say, really important to Yopa because of all of that sort of compliance side of things.
Yeah, and I think this plays really well into the poll that we've had in terms of blended and analytics and even compliance. So if I paint a picture that our field-based agents, so prior to COVID, prior to Thrive and so on, we would recruit around 10 new business owners per month, and they would be all across the country, and they would all travel for 2 weeks, and they would be on a residential 2-week face-to-face induction course. And I'm sure many businesses still operate in that way. And as did we. And if you'd have asked my traditional L&D mindset last year about, what if not all of it's face-to-face, I probably would have felt quite anxious. But actually, we completely rewired and revamped our strategy when COVID hit, because frankly, first of all, we didn't have a choice. But the amazing, and I can't be more positive about it. The amazing benefit that we've had is that we learned so much about blended. We learned what was actually business critical for face-to-face. We learned different methodologies in terms of how to facilitate blended learning. And what that's meant is, even in the new world of non-COVID, our induction will have gone from a 10-day residential face-to-face course to it will still be 10 days, but it will be around 6 to 7 days that will continue to be virtual, with only around 3 to 4 days residential. And we use those 3 to 4 days for skills practice, observation, and feedback. And we will harness our virtual methods for knowledge share and updates. So yeah, we've really learned how blended can work and how it can be useful, and that will now form part of our business as usual. So reduce the face-to-face training. We were still able to deliver sales training. Our agents are performing to a really high standard, so there has been no impact on performance. But one of the really great benefits is that we also have a significant saving in terms of training.
Yeah. Amazing. So we'll show some examples of that then, of some of your pathways. So we've got your, oh, sorry, I just pressed the wrong button. Okay, so we've got your field daily training induction pathway here.
Yeah.
Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so Amy, who is an absolute legend in my team, she is one of the L&D trainers who focuses on our sales population. You can see Amy's the expert in this pathway, and what she does is she sets up each and every day with content, as you can see. And part of the learning experience will be the delegates will often be able to pull some of this content down and then digest it. They will have self-study time. They will have observation and feedback time where they'll join some colleagues looking at content. And a technique that Amy uses a lot is train back. So what will happen is the delegates will do a knowledge dive on content, and then they'll come back on the video conference and they will present back some of the knowledge that they've harnessed, which is just a really, really more engaging and interactive way to deliver knowledge-based training and have the sanity check that the information has been absorbed, because you get that from what gets trained back to you. So that's just one thing that Amy will do with some of the pieces of content you can see on screen, and other parts she will present them to the group.
Yeah, great. And you can see down on the left, you've got all those different sections. So you obviously organise this for this specific pathway by days, which is great. Lots to consume when you start at Yopa.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think it's really nice to then see another example. So you've got this contact centre induction toolkit. So you obviously run different inductions for different groups, different audiences within Yopa.
Yeah. So Amy is she looks after all things field training, and then Alex in my team, she's also fantastic, and she drives everything that is related to contact center learning. So our contact center agents are this may be their first role into a state agency. So versus our field agents are already estate agents before they come to us. So Alex's induction program is really high energy, it's really interactive, and it's all things agency. But I think the key thing to pull out from it is, traditionally contact centers, they're contact centers, we all know what they like, what they look like. I'm sure I'm wearing maybe a contact center headset at this point in time. And we when the pandemic hit, we transitioned all of our contact center to work from home, and that was quite scary. But again, engagement was strong, performance was strong, and Alex was able to create a induction here for contact center that was fit for virtual delivery as well. So that's why this pathway has become a real hero piece of the Thrive platform.
Great. And then I think just to quickly touch on another example, the mandatory cybersecurity training, which I think pretty much every organisation these days has to run, unfortunately, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the reality is there is lots and lots of fun to be had in our learning strategy, and there are also some non-negotiables that any business would have. We try and make it a bit fun. So when we deployed cybersecurity training, we put a line in the sand and said everybody who completes by X date will all go into a prize draw, and we'll pull out 3 winners and you'll get some vouchers. So we did add a little incentive to drive the engagement on this, which was helpful in some cases and not in others. That's the reality. But again, I think looking at the platform, the key piece to pull out here is the usage of pathways. They're really, really helpful when you have multiple pieces of content that you want to group together into one key learning.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so then just back to the slides. I'm just conscious of time. We're coming up to the half-an-hour mark, so it'll be nice to move into some questions soon. But before we do questions, Angela, I think it'd be really great if we could summarize your key takeaways, what you've learned on this journey so far.
Yeah, of course. So number one, if you really, really need your learning strategy and your platform to deliver compliance training, fantastic. But be careful not to lead with it. You want to do something else first that will help pull your users in to improve the experience. Number two, an army of ambassadors. So as I said, our structure at Yopa is pretty lean. I do not have the luxury of a dedicated e-learning head in the business, but what I do have is three very, very talented people in my team, which is Emily, Amy, and Alex, that we've seen some content from. And the platform is so easy to use, and the off-the-shelf content is so easy. These guys are able to do this as part of their business as usual, and they really are ambassadors, to the extent where Amy is now working on a project to nurture future ambassadors who are all across the country. So really important to get some fans. Number three, keep adapting and keep evolving. This is a project that never ends. So I still have my regular Thrive project meetings, and we are, 6 months post-launch. And that's the way we like it, because I think if we ever get to the stage where we say it's finished, it's probably going to start being pretty boring. So it's how do we always evolve and adapt to what the business needs? That's keep evolving. And then finally, embrace the campaigns. They've really, really worked for us in terms of engaging people on a social level as well as a business level.
Great. Thanks, Angela. And then, finally, just before we do get into those questions, I can see we've got some coming through on the chat, so it'd be great to do the questions. But you've really had some absolutely amazing results at Yopa since you've launched this social learning strategy and since you've launched Thrive. So I think it'd be good just to touch on some of those results quickly. Amazing to see that you've had 96% of your audience have logged into the platform, which is incredible. 3,900% increase in content views compared to your old platform. That's huge.
Yeah, it is. But there was definitely a pattern of behavior on the old platform that we were that we really knew that we had to blow the socks off of. But to see it at that level is awesome. Yeah.
So would you put that all down to kind of delivering this sort of more social strategy, or what do you think has kind of been the key thing that's led to those amazing results?
Yeah, so the social strategy, but you know what? It's actually much more simple than that. It's the experience. It's the the UX of the platform overall. It's like, if you think about one of Steve Jobs' missions with the iPhone was that he should never have to write a how-to guide or an instruction book. It should be intuitive so that you know how to use it. I felt like that with Thrive, that actually it's very intuitive. Like, you've seen the search bar with Georgina, you've seen the pathways, the grouping of campaigns. So I think a lot of our content views is because people get on there, they enjoy the experience, it's easy to navigate, and I hope it's quite interesting. I hope, fingers crossed.
I'm sure it definitely is. Definitely looks it from what we've seen so far. So that's great. And you've got an overall engagement score of 19.9. So I know we calculate this by kind of taking all of the interactions, the social sort of side of things like your likes, comments, etc., and multiply that with how many users you've got on there and do some kind of calculation.
Wizardry.
Yeah. But we always want to have at least a score of 12. So an engagement score of 19.9 is amazing. So you're obviously really smashing it.
and you know, yeah, it can fluctuate, but as long as you know why your engagement score is where it is, you can always make sure that your strategy plays towards it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I think that was kind of everything we wanted to cover here before we jump into questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Angela, before we go to the floor and take questions?
I don't think so. I think it's just emphasizing the point of, you know, for the people on the webinar to think about the team that you have and to be confident that working like this doesn't necessarily take up extra resource. It's yeah, it's so intuitive. It can fit into the world that you're currently in, as Amy, Alex, and Emily have been able to show us here at Yopa.
Great. Okay, so we've got some questions then. So if I put these to you, Angela, what benefits do you think an LXP has ahead of a traditional LMS for you? So I guess you've got the advantage there of where you've used both.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are the advantages?
So really, there's a couple of things. So if I go for the obvious one to start with, when implementing an LMS, there is always a cost implication in terms of it's often a really specialist type of piece of software, and people are specially trained on how to use an LMS. It's all very complex at times, I would suggest. And you often need somebody in your organization with that skill set. If you go for an LXP over an LMS, you actually get such a simple piece of software to work with that literally your current headcount could, you know, work with and build. So first of all, there's a cost saving, although that might not be immediately obvious as you start to look at this, but from a resource perspective, you save. From a user experience perspective, you save. I have never ever, and I promise I don't say this because we've got Thrive on the call, authentically from the heart, I have never worked with a learning platform that is as simple to just bring to life as what this is. So cost saving, LMS, simplicity, and overall, it's the user experience. You know, people tag people, they like things, they comment on things. You know, the LXP plays to that traditional friend of social media that we all have in mind. So it's a familiar place when you're on there that you feel confident to comment and tag and like, because they're all behaviors that you actually implement in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess all of those things as well are just really great for kind of encouraging that engagement without actually the L&D team having to do anything, because it's your end users that are doing all of that commenting and tagging and liking, which is bound to pull people into the platform and see what's going on. So yeah, that's great. Okay, another question. So we're really trying to get learning engagement, but we're struggling. We have a social learning channel and lots of learning content, but people are not going in and viewing, liking, or commenting on. Any tips? So that's from Patsy.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you. That's a really good question, and I wish there was like a silver bullet answer for that one. In my experience, I'm afraid it's never been just one thing. It's probably marginal gains of lots of different things. So firstly, it's almost asking ourselves, is the content that you want your users to see, what's the why behind it, and then how do you correlate that why into what's important for your users? So trying to make that connection. And then I also think that if you're really, really struggling to get people in, you know, have you got an opportunity to go cross departmentally and find what I would call an ambassador or a super user that you can maybe work with in a small focus group to really get feedback from the users in terms of, what is it that stops them? Is it that they don't like the content? Is it they're not interested? Is it that they don't know why it's important? Is it that they've not got time? And I think you only really get to the bottom of that by like getting a pool of people together, And when you have got those ambassadors, champion them and encourage them to work with you when you do deploy content, or indeed, if you've got the facility, get them to deploy content, because that peer-to-peer approach tends to, again, I can only speak from the experience I've had with this, but the peer-to-peer approach is just as impactful, if not more impactful, than centrally distributed content.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we've got another question. So for each of these elements, so I guess the different types of content that we were showing previously, are they a mix of SCORE Me learning modules, MP4 videos, podcasts, PDFs, PowerPoints, etc.?
Yep, to all of that. So yeah, huge variety of formats. Personally, my favorite is when a user might see something on YouTube. It could be a TED Talks, or it could be something that they really like. Another way to post content in the LXP is you can literally just post the link, and all of a sudden, the interface, it looks very similar to YouTube. So again, it's like, oh, we can pull a video from somewhere else, just simply copy and paste the link, and the actual interface is very familiar to the users. So yes to all of that, and links.
And yeah, just a couple of bits to add to that as well. Some of the content that I showed was questions, so like top tips and the happiness question. So you can actually post a question to get answers from other people within your organization. You can also have your events on there. So if you are running any of those kind of classroom training, or whether it be online training sessions, you can schedule and host all of those through the platform. So yeah, there's all sorts of different things you can do in Thrive. Which also actually brings us nicely onto another question, which is, does the platform allow users to add their own content? So hopefully you can see from some of the content we did show earlier, it was users, just employees, colleagues of Yopa, sharing content, asking those questions, sharing videos, etc. And Angela, I think I'm right in saying this, that you've got it kind of switched on for everyone to be able to share content.
Yeah, we have. And that was like a big decision point at the beginning, because it's that fear. Oh my God, what if somebody puts something on there that's like really inappropriate? Thankfully, touch wood, that hasn't happened. And actually, I think it's a stickiness piece, because if a user can put their own content on, it feels more like their platform versus the business's platform. So yes, we have all users activated to add content.
Great. And just Steve, to sort of answer that question from a Thrive perspective, you can limit that if you wanted to. So you can limit what people are allowed to share in terms of the types of content, who people are allowed to share with. So you can have some control over that if you wanted to. But we are big advocates for switching it on to everyone and really just embracing that user-generated content style of sharing.
And it's really interesting. One of the examples I think that I've seen, we've only had the ones where let's just say there was a comment on a piece of content that you kind of thought, oh, is that right? And as quickly as I was reading it, the users then self-moderated both further with comments to not correct the initial comment, but to actually add more of a lens onto it, a wider thinking. So yeah, that's that I found that a really interesting experience. That yeah, from a moderation perspective, the users were like, really engaged to keep it positive.
Yeah, love that. We've also had a tip from someone else on the chat. So just in case anyone hasn't seen this, but someone else created a group of learning influencers within each business area, which I guess is kind of similar to the content champions.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's a really good idea for increasing that engagement. Thank you for that tip. Okay, another question. So how did your less tech-savvy employees find using the Thrive LXP?
How did they find using it? Honestly, yeah, it was really straightforward. One of the key things that so we took a couple of steps around that piece to make sure that we could counterbalance any fear of it. So some of the things that happened was, so Thrive is linked to our Google accounts through a single sign-on. So that's one barrier that's taken away. Everybody's always signed into their emails, so jumping into Thrive, there's no extra login, no extra barrier, which for the less tech-savvy people could be a detractor, if you had to log in again. What we also did was that when we launched at a company roadshow. So we made quite a big thing of it. And then we followed up in the 2 weeks following the roadshow with 45-minute sessions that were lunch and learns. And that was where every user was able to jump on a slot and get really, really comfortable with the navigation and ask an expert during that lunch and learn session. So for our established teams, that's how we counteracted it. And for new recruits, when we bring them on board, we actually use Thrive as a key tool in our recruitment and onboarding process. So before they start with us, we allow them to get onto Thrive and to, read some content and so on and so forth. So we actually bring it forward to make it a business as usual piece. So for those that are a bit less tech savvy, it's easy to navigate, and we have lots of touch points to make sure that they're okay with it.
Thanks, Angela. That also kind of answers another question that we've got, which is, can employees get access to the system even before their start date with the company, so with Yopa?
Yeah, you can, and Georgina or Rachel, who I work with, would give you a much more detailed answer. What I will say is, you have to just make sure that when you give them access, that you give them access to the content that you want them to see at that point. Because we've all had it where, you think you've got someone starting on the Monday and then they pull out on the Sunday. So, the onboarding access to make sure that we mitigate any risk. What we give them access to is much more generic content rather than anything that would be deemed as business sensitive. We deploy that when they're in row.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it is really nice for people who are joining to be able to have access to that, so they can actually kind of see what Yopa's about a little bit before they join and get a feel for things.
Yeah, all the lovely campaign and engagement content. Yeah, we let them see all of that.
Yeah.
Because it really, really positions us as a different thinking business when it comes to learning.
Great. Do you have any tips to share for digitizing classroom training?
I do actually. So there's the quick, simple, dirty way that I think probably every one of us have maybe fallen into at some stage, where you take your classroom slides and you just present them digitally. And whilst that isn't a terrible thing to do, you'll probably get a lot of learnings that actually it's really quite tough to replicate. So really, the tips I would share is really, really look at your content through the lens of what is knowledge only, what would need to be discussed, and therefore, what interaction would be required. And actually, are there any skills or behaviors that must be observed? So if you can think about knowledge share, interaction, and skills and behaviors, and it's then approaching each of those in the right way. So knowledge share, you can give information, either present it or provide it and ask them to present back. Interaction is making sure that you're using the right software that gives you the opportunity to have things like breakout rooms. So I know Zoom does. I don't know if Hangouts have got it on their radar to do it. So it's again making sure you've got the software that gives the breakout facility and the whiteboard facility. So it's kind of like flip charting in a room, a digital room. And then finally is the observable piece. So it's and again, so my view is from a blended perspective, are the only bits that we will bring back in face-to-face, is when we want people to practice and be observed and get feedback. But if you've not got the opportunity to bring that in face-to-face, it is about thinking differently in terms of how you can achieve that in a digital world. And often what that means is having shorter sessions that are usually 2-to-1, so that you get the person to do something and then they're observed and they get feedback. If you try and do that in a big group, you will often not really get that much interaction. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. So knowledge share, engagement, and skills and behaviours being observed.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Angela. So I think we've got time just for 2 more questions. So how do you use the reporting in Thrive, Angela?
So the reporting has been super helpful, and Thrive have recently, just implemented an upgrade on the reporting as well. So that's also been really cool. The way I use reporting personally is I use it to look at completions. I use it to filter by department, by team, and our manager cohort will use the reporting to specifically look at their teams and where they are, to really drive through any outstanding learning. So that's how we use it from I guess, an accountability and an adherence perspective. But where I also use it, where I'm much more interested, is actually where Georgina is at the moment, is actually starting to look at what are the behaviours and the trends that we see from people when they're online, what are they doing, how did they get there, and making sure that our content deployment lines up to how our users like to behave.
Yeah, so just quickly, this is a quick snapshot of our analytics and reporting area. We haven't really got time to go into the detail of this today, but there's lots of different things you can do, lots of reports you can run. You can take a look at your content stats and how they are being viewed, sort of popular times, how much it's being viewed, and your impressions, where that view is coming from. So you can have a look to see if people have found it through the search or through the homepage, which is really, really helpful, I guess, Angela, for like deciding how else you're going to push future campaigns and future learning, for optimum impact.
Yeah.
And we've got the user-generated content versus endorsed, so coming from your end users versus actually like the L&D team or the organization, and the tags as well, so you can see the sort of most popular topics that are covered here. So yeah, as I say, this is just a quick snapshot, but I think the important thing for Thrive especially is to just make it really simple and easy for people, for the admin or whoever's looking at this, to get that information, the data that they need really quickly, and to just be able to have some really great graphs to get useful information without kind of having to go off and run any reports or press loads of buttons to get what you need.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final question, which I think is a really nice one to end on, is how will you keep up your engagement moving forward?
Oh, that's a tough one. So how will we keep up the engagement moving forward? There's a few things, always approach the content. So we have our monthly content planning sessions. I'm really, really passionate that myself and my team, that we approach each of those meetings with the same energy that we approach the launch meetings. So every new month will always feel like a new month to us, and hopefully our users will feel like that too. So that's an engagement piece. Secondly, don't forget to ask your users what they want. It's so easy to fall into the trap of, hey, this is everything we're doing, have a look at this. But actually, the key thing with Thrive is that it's not just about that. It's very much two-way. So always link into user needs. And finally, I guess, think about think about the way that you land content in a way that says, if you know you've got a heavy compliance piece coming, schedule the timing of that piece, perhaps in between two other pieces that are really, really engaging. So it's I guess making sure you keep the energy flow of the content consistent versus having too long just on one thing, because people get bored.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Angela. I think we're coming up to the 1 hour mark. So yeah, I think we'll call that a day. I think we've answered all of the questions. So
thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for joining. I hope it was helpful.
Well, I definitely found it really interesting. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your insights and tips. It's been really, really helpful. And for anyone who has joined, we will be sending this recording out as well. So you can always share it with colleagues too, if it would be of interest to anyone else. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, guys.